All right, we're here.
All right, my friend.
We're
We
here.
figured it out. So we had an hour and a half, but now we have 45 minutes.
45 minutes.
So we're making a little adjustment with what we're watching today.
Yeah, what do you think? So how do you I did you I like I re-listened to our whole thing last time just to like hear myself.
I didn't. I can't do that. I still can't. I can't listen to myself. Right? I trust that it's like, okay, this is good enough. I felt it felt good when I was there. If I did something dramatic that needs to be told, somebody who watches will tell me. And if nobody's watching, that's probably also information too. What did you think?
A good amount of people watched it in terms of like just us just like randomly doing and put it up there.
You know, what did they think?
I think it was 4 likes and 20 something listens.
Dude, we quadrupled our likes from the first night. Talk about success.
Yeah.
This is sort of just a joke. I'm coming back before we jump into this. I'm coming back from I had to get drug tested because I'm thinking about driving a school bus for funsies in the morning. And I went there, thinking that it was going to be like a whole workup and this and that, just to make sure I was physically fit and so on. And the time was ticking by, right? And I was texting you. I said, "Hey, I thought I was going to be good at 2:30. Now it looks like 2:45." It was just moving really slow. It was crawling along. And by the time the doctor came in, it was like this really fit, tall black guy. He was really cool guy. Looked like a boxer, actually. He told me he was 67 years old. And he was talking to me about, he said, I listed one medication on the sheet, and it's propanolol. I think that's how you call it. And it's a medication that was described to me as something that people take before they do public speaking or this or that, because it's not like a sedative at all. It's not really strong at all. Just kind of takes the butterflies out of your system. And at one point, I was talking to my doctor about, because I couldn't exercise that much. And that's like my number one go-to just kind of like feel good and be able to tolerate just general sensation in the body. And I needed something I was like, you have like anything that could just kind of like knock me out like a benzo would or get me addicted. So that was the suggestion, right? So the doctor comes in, he sees that, and he's like, anxiety, huh? And I'm like, yeah, a little bit, but I was like, I don't really ever take it, just figured I would list it in case, as I get drug tested, if something comes up and it's an issue. And he starts talking, he starts telling me, the foundation of anxiety, how humans are built and how, when early on in the early stages, we had to have anxiety because it would put like this problem out there, and then you could sort of figure it out, and the blood would rush to your legs or your hands if you're going to fight, and the amygdala clicking back. And he's like going on and on and on, right? Really nice guy though. Told me he was an addiction counselor. I could tell like, oh, this guy's got a lot of wisdom to share. But I didn't want to tell him like what I do for a living. So because I didn't want the conversation to keep going, because I wanted to get back to this. Right. And so every time when he was finished, I was like, oh yeah, you're right. And so, yeah, I'm working on that. And, oh, that's a good idea. Right. Easier conceptually than, live though. And that would remind him of something else that he knew. And then he would keep going, and again, I didn't want to stop him because he was, sharing his wisdom. And in the back of my mind, I thought, okay, maybe there's something in here for me too, in terms of how I communicate this to my clients or so on. But I'm watching the clock tick by, and I'm thinking, all right, soon this guy's going to test me for my blood pressure, and my blood pressure is going to be through the roof because I want to get the hell out of here. Right. So I'm doing the nose breathing as he suggested already, but I was already doing that beforehand. But, I'm doing all these things to try to like stay calm and be like, and also move the conversation up and get it moving so I could get home to start live streaming. And, 10, 15 minutes into the conversation, he stops, he looks at me and he goes, okay, man, you're good. Respect. He smacks me on the chest and walks out. And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, there's no tests or anything. He's like, no, man, respect. And that was it. That was it. I just walked out. I was like, are you sure there's like nothing else? He's like, no, grab your card at the front. You're heading on out. And it was just cracking me up, man. Cracking me up. Respect. It was an eyeball test. This guy's been doing it long enough. He's like, no, your blood pressure's good. Respect.
You're good. You're good. Cool. How does that feel? Do you like trust it?
No, it's the silent killer. No, I want to get my numbers, but this doesn't mean that if I wanted to drive, I could,
Yeah.
So
Mm.
no issues there. But in terms of, my well-being and, being here for my family, we'll see. But I think it should be fine. I actually do have my own blood pressure monitor. I got that at one point just for funsies. I just wanted to see, like, let me see, like, all right, after I drink this energy drink, how's this doing me? After lack of sleep, after this or that, like, where am I at? And it scared the shit out of me. So that's why I wanted a doctor to do it.
Yeah.
So
Which kitty's that?
this is
Hanuman?
this is Hanzo's.
Hanzo's.
Yeah. Hanubanu. Hanubanu's a hard cuddler. Hanubanu loves hard. You really can't say, I can't say no to her because it's only going to make it worse. It's like, what is it? Impossible force meeting a immovable object. Unstoppable force. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what it is. So here you go, honey. Come here, baby. When she wants to love, she wants to love, but she's the cat. She's very in tune to it. Where like every time I'm about to give a healing, like the actual healing, shamanic healing part of the healing, she pops up, wherever she is. She could be like in the neighbor's yard and she'll come like, hop in the window, hop on my lap. Like, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Respect.
That's right. Respect.
All right.
So what you got for me? What you got for me today?
Yeah. So since we don't have a lot of time, we can't go for 3 hours today. This is like a 13-minute video. So this guy's name is Shadid King Bolson. I discovered him a few months back, and I just really like his takes. Disagree on some things, but I think he's a principled guy. I may disagree with some of his ideologies, but I really respect that he's principled and actually rooted in something real. Mm-hmm. He's a devout Muslim. He identifies as Muslim. He was born in the United States. He said you can tell he's channeling Malcolm X, because Malcolm, the biography of Malcolm X, according to him, is what motivated him to convert to Islam. So with everything going on in the Middle East, everything going on, mm-hmm. I've kind of found his content, and I appreciate his geopolitical analysis and his critiques of the West. I think maybe he may be a little putting too much faith in that, the answer is just Islam, right, to all of it. But I get what he's saying. I think he has really solid critiques and really solid analysis. Mm-hmm. And I know this is a fiery ass topic for us to dive into, but once the Charlie Kirk assassination happened, just the absolute chaos and noise that came from it, I found his response and analysis just to really cut straight through the noise and kind of really get to the truth of it all. Okay. So I would like to, listen to it. And I'm really interested in seeing how you respond or how you perceive this guy.
Let me ask first before we jump in, right?
Yeah. So
when he says that Islam's the answer for everything, right? I don't actually think that he really believes that in sort of a exclusive way. What my guess would be, and I don't want to make assumptions, which is why I'm sharing this, that, he has such an intimate understanding of Islam that the answer actually is in there. Right?
Yeah.
And when you're in touch with that level of reality, beauty comes in all forms, and there's all different ways to communicate that level of truth. Right. So that's how I was hearing it. Is that how you understand it?
Yes. There's the quality of truth when I listen to him speak, right? That he's tapping into something universal.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Let's rock.
All right. Adding him the stage.
Talk about this boy, Charlie Kirk, who got shot in Utah. Him getting shot in Utah makes him, I believe, American number 18,533 who got shot in the U.S. this year, shot and killed. And I think that there were 3 more people who were shot and killed in Colorado, just over the mountains, within hours of his shooting. And all the flags in America are going to fly half-mast, not for those 18,335 other victims, but they're going to fly half-mast for Charlie Kirk. That's just an observation. You can do with it what you will. I'll be honest, when I first heard that he had been shot, I made a joke about it on X. because frankly, I'm just as used to theatrics coming out of America as I am used to gun violence coming out of America, and I thought that theatrics seemed more likely in this case. But when I did learn that he died, I deleted my post. I deleted it out of respect, not for him, but for the severity and for the solemnity of the judgment that he has now proceeded to. Because everything that he ever said and everything that he ever did that harmed anyone, well, he's going to answer for that. He's going to answer for that right now in his meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the heaviness of that meeting is disturbing to any of us who believe in it. But we'll talk about it. Let's start with the obvious, okay? First, I'm not going to feign grief or feign mourning for this person. I know that's a hypocrisy that social etiquette demands at a moment like this, but we all know that he would certainly not grieve for us. He certainly would not mourn for us, just as he never grieved and he never mourned for the wanton slaughter of the Palestinians in Gaza. He never grieved for that. And for myself personally, as a Muslim and as a critic of Western so-called civilization, I know that Charlie Kirk himself would most likely have officially anyway considered me to be his enemy. And as far as I'm concerned, any man whose enemy mourns him when he dies, well, he wasn't doing his job. And I don't think it can be said about Charlie Kirk that he didn't do his job, which is to say that he never did anything and he never said anything in his public life that would make me mourn his passing, just as I hope that I will never say or do anything in my public life that would make my enemies grieve for my passing. They should be happy when I die. Enemies are disturbed by each other's presence, not by each other's absence. But let me also be crystal clear about this. It doesn't make me happy either. I neither mourn nor celebrate. Neither of those reactions is appropriate, in my opinion. Whoever pulled that trigger didn't do it for me and they didn't do it for you. I don't even see them as being on two different sides. They didn't silence Charlie Kirk. They amplified Charlie Kirk. The power structure never cared about that boy. They used him. And he's more useful to them now than he was the day before. He's more useful to them dead than he was alive. Listen, you don't defeat someone like this, someone like a Charlie Kirk, a tool like him, by letting that tool mold you into exactly what they want you to be. That killer didn't deliver justice. If you think they did, he didn't. He delivered to the power structure an even more enhanced weapon. He made a mediocre, but dangerous and polarizing figure, Charlie Kirk, into now an impeachable icon for the very fan base that he most likely despises.
Pause this.
And he made criticism.
So that's kind of, all right. So when he was first killed, I kind of shit my pants because I hadn't gotten to celebrating or mourning, which I never got to either way. Actually, you know what the thing was? I lost a few nights sleep because I was grieving. Actually, I wasn't grieving the loss of Charlie Kirk. I was grieving for his family, for his kids, as somebody who could relate and empathize with a family who lost, their father. And that really messed me up. And I remember actually sitting outside on my front steps through the night, working with ChatGPT as to how I could deal with the pain of where our country was going, all the gun violence and so on, and also the terror and the horror of what the government was going to do with this, just like this guy's saying right here.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I thought, okay, if this difficulty is precious, and what I mean by that is there is something in every difficulty and suffering that we go through that can actually help transform us. And the way I'm uniquely experiencing this is something that's precious for me to take a look at and not push away and judge as not valuable or just try to solve it away. So I was sitting there metabolizing the situation. And I was going back and forth with ChatGPT as to how the country was built, the spirit that the country was built on, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the different, I think it's like the Frederick Papers. I have a whole list. I have an email with basically how I broke all this down, because basically what it was doing was I said, this whole situation is forcing me to clarify myself as to what it means to be an American, what this country was built on, what that's all about, and the spirit, the living spirit of that relationally to the moment that we're in now. What did they intend in the beginning? What happened in between? Like, I know that they weren't expecting to have parties and this sort of thing, right? So there were certain aspects of realities that we're dealing with now that weren't anticipated before. And of course, that's what happens. Every hole in the system eventually gets taken advantage of, right? So now we have all these issues, and I'm trying to rebreathe those truths, right? And in order to do this, I knew at some point I was going to get behind a microphone again. And I said, I need to do my homework. I need to understand, what are the ideals that this country was built on, and how are those ideals being rebreathed today? How are they being used against us, and so on, right? So I spent a lot of time developing a potential path for myself. If I had all the time in the world, it'd be amazing, and I could just go make myself better, get informed, and so on, right? But at the same time, as adults with responsibilities, we have to learn how to prioritize as well, right? Like, what am I going to do with my time? Where am I going to get better? How am I going to figure out what's going on? So when I find myself in a difficult position, because one of the things that I want to do with my life is, and part of why I want to work with you on this, is show people what what a healthy example is to have a healthy argument, to have a healthy debate, right? To have, hang in there is all about understanding that if you're an atheist and I'm somebody who believes in God, if we sit down long enough and we can hang in there, we're going to know that we're talking about the same exact thing. We're going to find the same words eventually if we can do that. If I can see me and you and me, and we can understand each other and start to find a way to communicate and listen and ask good questions on that level, we're all going to get there. We're all going to walk each other home, right? And so I really believe that. So this is what I was thinking, because my heart was breaking thinking about what was going on. And so when I hear him not mourning, not celebrating, I think about people that get into fights with their loved ones, with people they love, and so on. And then they say, like, I hate you. And there's this like love-hate thing. And then there's another thing that happens when you reach a place of neutrality. And when you feel neutral towards someone, they're gone. They don't exist. You don't think about them. They don't. It's there. There's a certain level of indifference, right?
I say, like, the opposite of love isn't hate; it's indifference.
Yes, right. And love and hate, actually, scientifically, if you're a psychiatrist or psychologist, you probably already know this, but the brain is wired very similarly with these two expressions of the human condition, right? So when I hear this, I'm thinking about stuff like, all right, what is it to have an enemy, a true enemy? What is it when I hold an enemy as an enemy only, meaning there's a them and a me? And what is it to have an enemy as somebody who clarifies my position? A difficulty that's precious, because that starts to bring you into territory of a lot of sacred texts where, for example, the Buddha sat down and had tea with the demon. What was that? That was the act of inviting everything in. That was the act of the Rumi poem, The Guest House. That was a heart consciousness experience that was hanging in there, And so this is just what I'm thinking about as he starts to dive into this territory, because I know it's very inflammatory, but at the same time, these inflammatory experiences, when something is the most inflammatory, it is because we are attached to something typically, and we need to go with the flow. And this is how I'm holding it as we enter into this.
Okay. So are you seeing that him talking about being an enemy from that you're hearing it from a non-duality sense?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
I don't know yet. That's why I still, again, hang in there, right? I have to get the sense of, how does this guy communicate? Where's he coming from? What does he really mean when he says this? Because we can't take 4 hours per sentence to unpack it. Yeah. What did I mean by that sentence? And here's the consciousness I meant, and blah, 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 blah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's what I see in my client base all the time with people who are even particularly wounded, or it's a particularly wounded moment. I'll say something, we'll spend half an hour resolving the inflammation that what I just said did. And then they'll say something and I go, I see what you meant 30 minutes ago. My bad. And I go, good. I go, hey, thank you for hanging in there.
Yeah. Okay. So we're hanging in there with this guy.
Yes.
Hanging in there with this tech. Yeah. I'm going to wait until the whole thing's over to give my full experience and thoughts, feelings, and transference around the whole situation.
Okay. You're going to wait until the fair use thing is up and we get flagged, and then you say a few things.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good.
But we can stop it again in a couple minutes to avoid that.
All right. I'll hold back.
Into now an impeachable icon for the very fan base that he most likely despises. And he made criticism of Charlie Kirk's ideas. Now it's disrespect for the dead. This is not resistance. This is a gift. This is a gift to the very security state that he probably thought he was attacking. Now it's stupidity. Or maybe, as the conspiracy theories are already speculating, what actually happened was just a purge of an expendable asset to create a more powerful symbol. Oh, they'll use his death. Oh, how they will use it. They will use his death to paint every dissenting voice, every cry for a more just world. They'll paint it with the same bloody brush. They're going to use his death to avoid once again ever having to look in the mirror. They're going to hold Charlie Kirk's body up as a shield against any examination of the society that created him and the society that created his killer, the society that they made and that they rule, and you didn't do anything now but strengthen their hold on that society. They're going to use his corpse as a pulpit to preach from, and you just validated all the lies that they're going to be preaching. You understand me? Because listen, the truth is the Charlie Kirks of the world are not the enemy. The enemy is the society, it's the system, it's the power structure, it's the so-called civilization that creates boys like Charlie Kirk. I call him a boy because that's what he is to me. I'm 54 years old. That's what he is to me, or that's what he was. And also because he presented a childish, simplistic cartoon portrait of America that only a young boy could ever believe in. He presented an America without complexity, without guilt, without the burden of their terrible history. Well, that's a seductive product. And America has always been an eager market for that sort of a product. He existed because of supply and demand. You demand and the power structure supplies.
Just tapping in there to break up the fair use, but going off of that, that feeds in, plays right into the part when we were talking about in the last episode. The greatest source of our suffering is the lies we tell ourselves. And like this all, it's this big, like we're just not being truthful about who we are. And if we're not truthful about who we are, we can't become better.
Let's reframe what the lie is. Because it actually, the way I hold it is the lie actually, let's just play with it because I don't know if I want to name it yet. So to me, if I go back to the idea in the first episode of false clarity, meaning we have something that's very confusing, something that upsets us, something that's very uncomfortable. If we can land on, what this guy's saying about the seductive simplicity of having a certain clarity, like here's this is what that is, that's what that is. It's very easy to move through our lives that way. It's much more difficult to be putting all this energy in our prefrontal lobes, right? And to be considering and holding all possibilities and including as much of our reality as possible and letting that work us day to day, moment to moment. Because what happens when I do that, my lived experience of that is where I want to go. The idea of where I want to go, it's a much slower experience to get there. And I can get very impatient and I can get frustrated because a new piece will show up and I have to slow down again and metabolize that piece too. And let my goal and where I think I want to go change if it needs to change. Right. And all of that takes a tremendous amount of commitment, integrity, and fundamentally energy. You got to get a good night's sleep. You got to learn how to do this. Otherwise, you're going to surrender yourself, give yourself up too soon to a false clarity, which is what the most seductive thing is, right? And then the lie is that limitation that we have, and perhaps it's a choice. Perhaps I'm choosing to have. This is what Asmongold is all about, by the way, which is why to me he's junk food and he's entertaining. Because even though I know he's one of the top 5 political commentators on these platforms, which blows my mind, but also informs me about what's possible and what we should be doing here, right? He has so much, in my opinion, false clarity. It's so easy. Oh, this is what that is. Oh, this is what that is, right? And people love it, man, because he just settles them, gives them a place to stand. They can bow before him, this guy with answers. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I don't often hear him say, you know what, I'm going to have to sit with this for a while. And I'll have to really think about this because I'm going to let the muddy water kind of clear up on its own by holding space for it. Mm-hmm. Never heard those words come out of his mouth, And the idea is that this is what we as human beings do. We take shelter. We take safety. We create a hyper-real simulacrum that we can run into to save ourselves from our discomfort. And what is it? The discomfort of the unknown, and so on. Just like really uncertainty. Yeah. What is that going to bring up? Anxiety. It's going to bring up every single time when somebody who in my life wasn't treating me well and they're coming around. Are they going to hit me today? Or are they going to be nice to me? What's it going to be? Right. You meet that holographically in each moment whenever uncertainty shows up again. If you haven't done that work, you're going to find someone that gives you that certainty, and it's going to be a lie, maybe a lie that you choose to tell yourself. And that's the worst kind because you're consciously denying it and kind of, you're a piece of shit. And then sometimes it's just because you got all these other responsibilities. You got to land somewhere. This is too much. It's too much. That's the whole not that I don't really believe this, but the White House does this. I'm not, I can't, I don't know how to tiptoe.
The White House, which we love.
That's what I'm saying. I'm trying. Thank you for bringing me back. So like, they'll throw so much at you over and over and over again. So you're not even done metabolizing one piece before the next piece comes. Right.
The Zone, Steve Bannon.
But here's where that's going to, in the long run, that's actually going to screw them, because those of us that can see that for what it is and start to say, oh, you know what, by the time I'm done with not even done with one, the next one comes, there's a meta understanding implicit in that chaotic order is another order. And you can see, oh, they don't want us to know. They don't want us to know. Right. And that's enough for us to take a step back and start to think differently about the actions of the White House and so on. I fully support them, of course, but right, there's this kind of stuff in there. So anyway, it's look, man, this is really deep stuff. And this guy is smart, So I don't, I hope a lot of people can hang in there with us. Not saying that like we're the smartest, but this is the work that I do. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like if this was a really smart physicist, I'd be like, I don't know that language. I haven't been exposed to this kind of way of thinking. It might be hard to go along for the ride, but this kind of stuff is what makes the difference. When you can get to this level and think this way and take a step back and say, you know what, maybe it's better not to have answers, you're doing yourself a world of service, because at least you're not making more problems by thinking,
Yes. You got to stop digging before you can get up.
That's right. Narrative goes deeper. Narrative always looking for the golden nugget at the end. It's a quest to try to save myself from where I am and where I want to be. And that's a setup to be in the pursuit of happiness all your life and never actually get there. Mm-hmm. It's a story. It's a conspiracy.
Cool.
Killer and the killed are the products of the same sick society.
Two sides of a third thing.
And his killer and the other 18,535 victims and their killers. And wallahi, if you don't clock this reality, if you don't understand this reality, and if you let yourself get swept up in all the narratives and all the counter narratives, then you might just end up being like one of them on one side or the other side of that gun, because the machine is already spinning. The machine, that same machine that Charlie Kirk served so faithfully. They're spinning the narrative now. They're going to label him as a martyr for free speech, a victim of left-wing extremism. And they're going to use his death. They're going to use it to demand more surveillance, more censorship, more policing, more militarization of the police against their opponents, more police powers. They're going to use his blood to sanitize his ideology and to legitimize every poisonous thing that he ever said. And some of you are out here cheering about what happened. Well, you're fools. Why, when you celebrate, all you do is elevate and strengthen their narrative. Charlie Kirk was not an outlier. He was a product. He was the logical output of a system that's designed to generate exactly what he was. Like I said, he didn't create the demand. The demand was already there. He just exploited it. He sold a fantasy, like I say, a fantasy where all of the problems of modern America, economic decay, economic despair, cultural displacement, and cultural unrest, political powerlessness, these are all not the inevitable results of late-stage capitalism in a dying empire. No, it's all the fault of immigrants. It's all the fault of minorities, of wokeism, some internal enemy that's not in power. Well, now he's been killed, and his death is going to be used to service that same system. The security state benefits, the politicians that he supported benefit, the media benefits because they get endless hours now of content, of debate, of fear-mongering, of polarization mining. You understand me? The entire apparatus of control gets a massive boost. His killing was not an attack on the system. It was a gift to the system. You didn't extinguish a fire, you just scattered the embers and made it more dangerous. The individual who pulled that trigger, their motives are irrelevant. It doesn't matter if they saw themselves as a revolutionary or they saw themselves as a vigilante. Their actions serve a deeply counter-revolutionary purpose. You understand me? You didn't help Muslims. You didn't help so-called minorities. You didn't help immigrants. You didn't help women. You didn't help anyone. All you did was exactly what they created Charlie Kirk to goad you into doing. Please understand me. You contributed now. Whoever did this contributed to exactly the climate that they created Charlie Kirk to create. No, they're both servants of chaos. The killer and the killed. No, you don't need a bullet. You need a brain. You need a mind that can't be manipulated. You need an inflammable heart, a heart that can stay calm, cool, and collected when everything around you is in flames. That's what you need. And wallahi, you can't let the hatred of a people cause you to act unjustly, or to advocate or to endorse injustice, or to celebrate injustice. Don't let that boy's enmity towards us and ours towards him make you think that his murderer is our ally. No, you don't answer words with bullets. You know, back in the day, back in the time of the Sahaba, when the Muslims would fight against the Kuffar, well, the Kuffar, they would bring their drummers and they would bring their singing girls to egg them on. Nobody ever killed them. Well, that's what Charlie Kirk was. You don't win a war by targeting the singing girls and the drummers of your enemy. That's no strategy. I've said many, many times, you have to erect your partitions around your discourse, around your people, around what you let into your mind, or you're going to lose your focus and you're going to lose your purpose and you're going to get confused and you're going to make bad decisions. You're going to make wrong decisions.
Okay. Before we go too far upfield, he said some profound things here, right? I snuck in.
He's cooking. Bro, this
He's
guy.
a smart guy. And he's talking about, right? He's talking about the consciousness that creates this, right? Charlie Kirk was in his opinion, was a product of a particular environment, right? The natural outgrowth of something that was already happening. This is actually some of the videos I wanted to show you today, but I felt honestly just too tired to present them because it was just like this. I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this again. But I want to clarify because it can be helpful to use other language. And I think the model that we use can actually be more relatable, right? So what he's talking about, he's a product of an environment that we could call a quarter. And there's heads and tails on that quarter, right? And Charlie was heads consciousness, and this kid was tails consciousness. And by acting in a dualistic manner, that this kid just, intensified his side and thus intensified the other side, right? So the only killing that you can have when you're in quarter consciousness, when you hold both sides, is killing the lie, killing the product of the false self, going back to the source of the consciousness that created all this in the beginning. How do you do that? You actually do that through love. By holding both sides, that's an act of love. Third thing in quarter consciousness is a loving attitude of inclusion rather than exclusion. So the only thing that can die, right? I mentioned in episode 1, I was a football player all my life. I had to take 10 years off. Why? Because that football player had to die. My teacher didn't rail a fucking knife through my heart. She held me, gently while I experienced the vulnerability of letting go of the mastery I had around this false persona. You know what I'm saying? And I had to kill the football player so that something new could be born. And that's destruction in the spirit of creation, both of them together as one, heads and tails consciousness. Mm-hmm. And when you have destruction or murdering or killing just for killing, you're intensifying one, and it's only going to intensify the other. It's Ram Dass talked about this back in the day with cops and robbers, right? The hippies and the police force, right? It was no different. When you can hang in there and see both sides and see where you're coming from and see that, all right, maybe you have a more vivid expression of one side and they have a more vivid expression of the other side, but we're both made of the same thing, right? I might be very free in my authoritarianism and they're very authoritarianism and they're free. It's like, it's the same thing. It's just two sides of the same thing being expressed in a different way. And when these two sides are held in opposition, we don't need to murder the other side. That's never going to help. Nothing has changed. It's only made worse. You have to transform. That's why it's so hard. And nobody has had that example. You know what I'm saying? So few of us have had the example of somebody who lives a life of integrity that it actually allows them to alchemize through a spirit of inclusion and love and quarter consciousness that holds both sides and says, you know what? I don't have an answer yet. I'm going to have to wait 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, 3 decades before I do anything about this so I don't create more problems, right? And I'm not saying that you don't save someone who's drowning, but until you get to that moment, murder is never the answer, right? If we killed Hitler, I don't know, would there have been of somebody worse if you could go back in time? That whole thing, right? Because he was a product of his environment. You know what I'm saying? And this is the kind of stuff that we really have to consider. And I'm not saying that I have the answers, but I do know the way. I do know the process. I can give you the map. You walk the territory. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. All right. 3 more minutes.
Unjust decisions, immoral decisions, because you let yourself get provoked. No. For me personally, I didn't care about Charlie Kirk yesterday, the day before, and I don't care about him now. I don't mourn and I don't celebrate. That's strategic indifference. And I don't respect anyone who tries to tell me that I'm supposed to grieve. And I don't respect anyone who tells me that I'm supposed to be happy. What is he to me or me to him? He certainly isn't more important to me than the most likely hundreds of thousands of my brothers and sisters that you cut down in Gaza. You didn't mourn any of them, and I didn't tell you to, because I already know how you are. I already know that your performance of mourning over Charlie Kirk has nothing whatsoever to do with respect for human life. He was just a vessel for an ideology that you hold sacred. And it's an ideology that dehumanizes people. It's an ideology that disregards the sanctity of life. And we've seen that on full display for the last 2 years. So no, obviously not. I'm not the least bit interested in accommodating your weaponization of selective compassion and selective sympathy. Now, if you want to paint my indifference, if you want to spin my indifference as if it is approval of the crime that was committed, well, okay, I already know that you never do anything but lie anyway. And I know that you are from exactly the same manipulated, mutated, mutilated, and maladjusted population that created the demand that the power structure met by giving you Charlie Kirk and that gave you his killer. Meaning you're just part of that mob in America, that same collective monster that's responsible for the American genocide of the indigenous people, that's responsible for genocides in Guatemala, genocides in Bangladesh, in Iraq, in Cambodia, in East Timor, in West Papua, and in Gaza. And you're the same collective monster that's responsible for every atrocity, every heinous crime that your country has ever committed. As far as I'm concerned, you poisoned Charlie Kirk's mind before he could even have a chance at a decent life, a moral life. And you poisoned the mind of the one who took the life that Charlie Kirk had. So spare me your counterfeit moralizing. No, you turned your country into a psychological and a spiritual torture chamber. And then your country turned the global South into a physical and an economic torture chamber. And now that system, that same system that you're serving, is turning inwards on you now. I told you that political violence, division, and terrorism, and civil unrest, and turmoil, I told you all this was going to be coming home. Why? Because that's your business model. That's your business model. And you're the only market left to vanquish. And the more you give yourself up to all these twisted, polarizing, hateful narratives, well, all you're doing is playing along with your own demolition.
Okay.
We got it.
Rest now, brother, and I'll see you in Valhalla.
It was never my intention to make light of the murder.
Charlie Kirk, he died like a Viking king.
I forgive him.
This.
All right, let's get rid of that. So
You got to turn off autoplay next time.
we're learning. Okay. So
Yeah,
how
I'm
many
interested
people,
in,
sorry,
hearing that.
what's that?
I'm interested in, after you hearing that, what's your takes?
So it's always nice to hear other people communicate stuff that I'm exploring, right? You heard a lot of what I had to say from it because, the guy was coming from a very deep place. He cut through the bullshit. I don't know him personally, so I don't know if he's an emotional guy outside of these kinds of talks, but the reason why I included the story of me grieving is because it touched me. And I wasn't grieving Charlie Kirk. I wasn't grieving like, oh, here's a guy that I loved. He's my enemy or not. And I'm grieving him. I was grieving like the whole fucking human condition.
Yeah.
The fact that this happened. And personally, I related to his family and so on. Right. And I was just so heartbroken that it happened. So when I hear a guy like this talk, the first thing I wanted, to be honest, is who's listening to him? Who's really taking in his words? And is he making a difference? Honest question. I hope he is. You like him, huh? How'd you find him?
Just came up in my algorithm. Probably because I've tried to really educate myself deeply on the history of the Middle East, particularly since October 7th of 23, once it kicked off. I wasn't completely uneducated, but like I really have been trying to like understand all the dynamics. And I think just like through the stuff that I've watched, like he came up one time and I just could feel something powerful about the way he carries himself and the way he speaks.
Mm-hmm. While you're talking, I'm going through my Audible right now because I'm trying to get the name of a book that I read about the Middle East that I thought was a very good exploration of what happened, how Israel and Palestine popped off, right? How was it created, and what was the consciousness of the people that were doing this kind of thing? And God, I've read a lot of gosh darn books since then. But I was doing this because it was right when I was starting to explore doing the possibility of the show News Healing with William Kern, which was basically I was trying to bring non-dual healing into the news, and I wanted to, I'll find it another time. I don't want to take up too much of a time while I'm looking for this, but, I was trying to find a way to resolve these conflicts and not actually solve, here's my solution, right? It's a way of holding it, compassionately holding the dilemma and the predicament that we're in and how crazy it's gotten, right? And how much history there is and how intense that historical experience creates the moment, right? Intensity for me means that there are so many stories about what's going on woven into the experience of what's going on. That's what's making it so intense, is the memory that we're still holding. And the reason why people don't heal is because we're attached to our stories. And we're attached to our stories for a lot of reasons. Number one, they give us comfort and they give us clarity. They keep us in the known so we know what to do. We can tell people I've been hurt and this is how it happens, so we can protect ourselves in the future. But we also do it because it's familiar, right? And it's hard to let go of what the story is actually covering up within us, which is an element of the human condition, like horror and grief and despair and so on, the worst of the worst feelings. So we have these stories that help hold us, and they also they show the way and block the way at the same time, And so, this guy brings up a lot of good points, right? Like fundamentally what I'm taking away from is like really how all of this is a product of a particular consciousness that we're working with on a global scale now.
Yeah.
Like one of the videos I was going to bring in was how I disagree with it, of course, but how Trump isn't like a little Putin, but instead Trump and Putin arose because of a particular consciousness that's getting worked through on the planet. And there's major psychological issues at hand here. And there's a reason why we elected them. And we made our bed,
Sure.
we're going to have to lay in it, right? And it's really important to start to go to these deeper levels because we can get stuck just, being a hammer looking for nails. All right, here's a problem. Let me kill it off. Let me get rid of this problem. Done. Right. And then another one pops up. Let me get that one. Another one pops up. Let me get that one. Before you know it, right, there's so much inflammation, we don't even know where to start. Right. And then what do? Well, you're kind of fucked. you know. And that's when things really start to fall apart and it starts to become, I don't know. I hope that at some point, all the destruction is in relationship to creation at the same time. And it's not just destruction, Me
too. I'm trying to find where that is. I see some stories here and there, but it's hard to see it and be with that hope when there's so much destruction coming. Like there's another video of him we can watch another time called The Devil's Due, and essentially talking about like Trump was inevitable. Like there's no avoiding it. It was like I was talking in the last episode about the accountability of our ancestors, right? And essentially it was that like nothing is stolen, everything is just borrowed. That's what he says in the other video. And I was like, yeah, like our ancestors borrowed, they did not steal, and we have to deal with it. We owe a debt, and we are facing it now. This is the imperial boomerang coming home, and we have to face the music. We can't turn away from the music anymore. Like there's no more out there to project our shit onto.
Yeah.
It's here. Like you see, everything's a hammer and a nail. We've hit all the nails that are outside, and now we're nailing ourselves.
That's right. And at some point you got to take a step back and see that that's what we're doing. Right.
Yeah.
And if we're caught in such fear and intensity, it's hard to see that because, it's like somebody that has just so much going on, who they really are doesn't come along for the ride until they realize that how exhausted and addicted and sad they are. And it's like, wait, this is a moment of transformation.
Mhm.
You can't problem solve your way out of this. That strategy of problem solving only took you so far. And that's good that you're smart enough that you can do that. And now you got to be smart in a different way. Get out of your head. And it's more the intelligence of the heart that includes the head. So it's an intelligence that goes beyond that. It includes our brilliance and our intellect and so on, but it goes beyond that where there's no other. This is they talk about in spiritual texts, especially in my 20s, I read a lot of not quite prophecy, but what makes a prophet. And my understanding of a prophet is somebody that can see the potential of something, that sees through something to what something really is. And so you can't tell the future per se, but you can get a pretty good sense of where it's going if somebody doesn't wake up and transform before that's going. Like somebody who's getting pulled further and further into an addiction, and you go, oh, okay, this person's either going to figure it out or they're going to hit a rock bottom, and then we'll see what happens. Maybe that rock bottom helps them address the parts of them that are most resistant to change, or maybe they're able to meet it before then, right? But I'm not a prophet to be able to say that that's what's going to happen. It's just being able to see the truth in the moment and how it unfolds. So in my 20s, I read a lot about this. And one of the things that they say is that in the English language, at least, is that there's a good chance we're going to have the 27th letter to the alphabet added at some point. And that 27th letter has something to do with a greater sense of consciousness that's coming in, a larger model. And it has something to do with an understanding of the brotherhood and the sisterhood of man. And when I think of that, I always think of that in the back of my mind, because it's my hope that all of this is our precious difficulty that helps us transform. And when we start to see that this dualistic problem-solving consciousness where we kill something off rather than actually letting it transform us, eventually breaks our hearts to the point where some larger model of consciousness can come in, like any good spiritual koan. Like if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there to hear the sound, does it make a noise? Right? There's no real answer to that. It brings you into a different state of consciousness where you start to look at yourself in the world differently. And spiritual koans only speed up the natural process of life, which is always doing this. As human beings, we have this capacity. And so we can make it as bumpy as we want, or we can work it consciously all along the way. Reality is healing. You want to get on board? What's that?
Productive suffering.
Productive suffering. That's right. We walk right into it rather than killing it off, thinking that we're doing something helpful. Yeah. Right. So we all need to be able to see these events on a grand scale and say, like, okay, that's not the way. So I don't know what the way is, but I'm not going to pretend like I do and rush to some false clarity that's creating more problems down the road.
Same with, I said last episode about, I may not have the answers of what to do, the solution, but we can work it enough and bring in enough information where we can say, that's definitely not it. We definitely shouldn't be doing that. We should try something else.
Right. And in that way, we learn by failing.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And then more information.
That's right. That's right. And so that's what I'd take away. I got to jump time wise, unfortunately, but I think this was good. We got there, man. We squeezed it in. Cool. Nice. If you think about it, if there's other stuff you wanted to bring into the next hang in there episode, I'd love to talk about it. But I hope I did you justice, my friend.
You did.
All right, brother. I love you. I'll see you.
Dude.
Bye-bye.